My father didn't lower his voice when he said it. He didn't even pretend to whisper. "Do we really have to stand next to a homeless-looking woman tonight?" His words sliced through the grand hall, sharp enough to make 200 people turn. I felt every gaze like a cold fingertip against the back of my neck. My sister, Evelyn, leaned in with her brittle smile and hissed, "Please don't embarrass us, Harper. These people are above you." Above me, as if I were crawling through the marble floors instead of standing in borrowed heels and a plain black coat I'd worn for 5 winters. No one said a word to defend me. Eyes scanned me, confusion, judgment, disgust, then slid away with the practiced indifference of people who'd spent their whole lives learning exactly who belonged in rooms like this. I stood there, swallowing the heat rising in my chest, until the chandelier's gleam blurred and steadied again. I should have walked out. I should have turned my back and spared myself the humiliation. But I stayed. I stayed because some wounds demand witnesses. And because none of them, not my father, not my sister, not the 100 polished ghosts drifting across that ballroom, knew the truth. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't helpless. And before that night ended, they would learn exactly who I had become. I'd been invited, or rather summoned, back to Boston for the annual Grant Holiday Gala, the one I'd been banished from a decade ago. The invitation came in an embossed envelope lined with gold foil, pretending to be elegant when it felt more like a warning. "The family expects your presence," Evelyn wrote, as if my absence all those years had been a choice instead of an exile. Walking into that hall now felt like stepping into a perfectly preserved museum my family curated, a world where names were currency, reputations never cracked, and appearances mattered more than air. Marble floors gleamed under chandelier light. 12-foot wreaths wrapped in gold ribbon hung from the balconies. Servers in crisp uniforms carried trays of champagne, avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked even remotely out of place. People like me. I hadn't seen my father in 7 years, and the first words he offered were the same kind of quiet violence he'd mastered my entire childhood. He looked older, lines deeper around his mouth, the carefully maintained arrogance sagging at the edges, but his eyes still held that familiar, cold appraisal, the one that measured a person's worth by the volume of their compliance. "Harper." He nodded, as if confirming I was real, not a rumor returning to haunt him. "You made it." I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice not to show the tremor in my hands. Instead, I stood straighter, letting the weight of being underestimated settle over me like armor. Evelyn drifted closer, wearing a crimson dress that cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair was pinned perfectly, every strand sculpted into the image of the daughter my father always wanted. "You could have dressed nicer," she murmured without moving her lips, the way she'd been trained since childhood. "People are staring." "Let them," I said. Her eyes flickered, annoyance, embarrassment, a spark of fear that I might cause a scene. She'd forgotten that once, long ago, I used to try to please her. I used to shrink myself to fit into this family's glittering mold. But that girl was gone, buried somewhere between Detroit and Chicago, under layers of exhaustion, ambition, and broken illusions. Our mother had been the only buffer between me and the Grant expectations. When she passed, the buffer vanished, and so did any place I held in this house. My father remarried within a year, replacing warmth with discipline, softness with precision. Margot Grant, his new wife, perfected the art of smiling while cutting. She knew how to turn a room against a person without raising her voice, and she practiced most often on me. I saw her now across the ballroom, speaking to a cluster of guests. Her face held that elegant rigidity I remembered, as if emotions were beneath her. Her gaze slid across the room, landed on me, and stiffened. I watched her fingers tighten around the stem of her glass before she turned away. Some things never changed, but I had. I stepped farther into the ballroom, refusing to let the old fear take root again. Servers brushed past me without offering a drink. Couples paused their conversations to calculate whether acknowledging me would cost them social points. Evelyn followed close, whispering directives like she was briefing a liability in a damage control scenario. Don't talk to the donors unless they speak to you first. Don't stand too close to Dad. And please don't mention where you live. Evelyn, I interrupted softly, I didn't come here to make you comfortable. She blinked, momentarily speechless. It might have been the first time she realized she no longer held power over me. I walked toward the tall windows overlooking the snowy grounds. Outside, flakes drifted silently over the frozen garden. So peaceful it felt like a different world from the one I'd stepped into. Inside, the orchestra played something classical and expensive. Guests moved like polished machinery, their laughter sharp, their whispers sharper. I watched them the way an anthropologist might, studying the rituals of a tribe I no longer belonged to. Someone tapped my shoulder. For a second, my chest tightened. I expected my father or Margot or a server telling me to move. Instead, I turned and found an old high school classmate, Serena Hollis, in a metallic silver gown. "Harper Grant?" she said, brows lifting. "Oh my God, I didn't even recognize you. Where have you been hiding all these years?" Her smile carried curiosity but not kindness. "I wasn't hiding," I said. She laughed lightly, as if that was a joke. "Everyone thought you'd, well, vanished after college." Her gaze traveled down my coat, lingering on the worn fabric. "Life must be different for you." Different. Yes, harder, messier, lonelier, but also fuller, truer, more mine than anything this mansion ever offered. "Excuse me," I murmured. I left her standing amid her shimmering entourage, their perfumes blending into something sweet and suffocating. I made my way toward the edge of the hall, where the orchestra's music faded into the background. I stood alone, letting the noise blur into white static. The air smelled faintly of pine, and something metallic, like the taste of anticipation before a storm. That was when the room shifted. Not literally, but I felt it. A subtle current of attention bending from the center of the hall. People straightened, voices softened, heads turned toward the double doors at the top of the marble staircase. I followed their gaze, and my breath caught. Lucas Hawthorne walked in. Even from across the room, his presence cut through the glittering crowd like a blade. He wore a charcoal suit, sharp lines framing a posture built on quiet dominance. His dark hair, touched by the cold from outside, gave him a rugged edge that contrasted with the sterile elegance of the guests around him. This was the CEO whose name filled financial headlines, the man whose decisions shifted markets. But seeing him here, moving through my family's world, felt surreal. He scanned the room with calm indifference, acknowledging a few greetings without slowing his pace. Then, unexpectedly, his eyes found mine. For a moment, the noise of the ballroom receded. The orchestra softened. The lights dimmed. The only thing I could hear was my heartbeat pressing against my ribs. Lucas started walking toward me. With every step he took, conversations halted. People parted. It was as if the room had been holding its breath, waiting for the reason a man like him had entered this palace of pretense. I felt Evelyn appear at my side. "Why is he?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Is he looking at you?" She sounded terrified. I didn't move. Lucas stopped 3 feet in front of me, hands relaxed at his sides, expression unreadable but firm. When he spoke, his voice carried just enough volume for those closest to hear, yet somehow it reached every corner of the hall. "Harper," he said, his tone steady, certain. "I'm glad you came." I heard someone gasp behind me. Evelyn's grip on my arm tightened involuntarily. My father, halfway across the room, froze mid-conversation. Lucas's gaze dropped briefly to my coat, then rose again to meet my eyes. Not judgmental, not pitying, assessing, respecting. He turned slightly, positioning himself between me and the ballroom without blocking me. A protective gesture, subtle but unmistakable. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, though my pulse was still trembling. "Good," he replied. Because we have things to discuss tonight. I wasn't sure if the room heard that sentence, but they certainly heard what came next. A man in a navy tuxedo, someone my father had been groveling to all evening, approached Lucas with outstretched hand. "Mr. Hawthorne, welcome. We're honored." Lucas didn't shake his hand. Instead, he looked directly at me. "I'm here as her guest," he said. A ripple of shock spread across the hall. I felt the floor steady beneath me, like a foundation I never knew I'd been standing on. Lucas's presence at this gala was no small gesture. It was a declaration, one that sliced clean through every assumption my family had ever made about me. Before anyone could respond, a server rushed by with champagne. He paused, offering the tray to Lucas, and then hesitated before glancing at me. Lucas took 2 glasses. He handed one to me first. My father's face paled from across the room. Evelyn whispered, "What is happening?" I didn't answer her. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel small in this house. I didn't feel out of place. I didn't feel like a ghost haunting a world that rejected me. I felt seen. And as Lucas angled closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear, he said words that made my throat tighten with disbelief. "You don't have to stand alone tonight." The chandelier above us glittered brighter, refracting light across the hall like a rain of gold. The orchestra swelled. Guests scrambled to recalibrate their social instincts, and the marble beneath my feet felt steady for the first time. They thought I was nothing. They thought I was disposable. They thought I was a girl too weak to survive without their approval. But I wasn't the one drowning tonight. They were. And before this night ended, before the last glass of champagne was raised, I would finally show them the truth. Not through anger, not through revenge, through power they never saw coming. The morning I left Boston for Detroit, the sky hung low and gray, sagging with the weight of early winter. I stood at the bus terminal with a duffel bag that wasn't fully zipped and a bank account that wouldn't survive a single emergency. People brushed past me in hurried lines, dragging suitcases, clutching coffees, wrapped in heavy coats that actually blocked the wind. I had none of those luxuries, just a second-hand jacket, a stubborn sense of pride, and the echo of my father's last words still burning in my chest. "You'll fail out there, Harper. Some people aren't built to make it on their own." The bus hissed, the doors squealed open, and I climbed aboard. I didn't look back. Detroit greeted me with cold the moment I stepped off the bus, a sharp, biting cold that stung my fingers and settled into my bones. The station smelled like gasoline and old pretzels. A man shouted at someone on the phone. A woman cradled a baby wrapped in a worn blanket. No marble floors, no polite smiles, no chandeliers. Just real life, loud and unfiltered. The kind of life Boston had always pretended didn't exist. I hauled my bag over my shoulder and walked the 5 blocks to the building that was supposed to be my new home. Home, as it turned out, was a stretch. The hallway leading to my room was dim, lined with flickering lights and peeling paint. My room was a square barely large enough to fit the mattress pushed against the wall. The window whistled when the wind blew. The radiator clanked like it was choking on its own rust. When the landlord handed me the key, he gave me a once-over and said, "Girls who come here alone don't usually last long." I didn't answer. I was too tired to argue. That first night, lying under a thrift store blanket that smelled like someone else's detergent, I stared at the cracked ceiling and wondered if my father was right. Maybe I wasn't built for this. Maybe I should have stayed, swallowed my pride, let myself shrink until I fit into the tight corners of his expectations. But then I remembered the look in his eyes as he dismissed me, the boredom, the irritation, the belief that I was a burden. And I knew I'd rather freeze in a room like this than spend another day starving for scraps of his approval. The next morning I started job hunting. Detroit wasn't welcoming, but it was honest. Employers didn't pretend to care about my last name. They didn't care about the Grant family legacy. They didn't care who my father played golf with or who my sister's friends were. They cared about numbers, skills, output. That was something I could give. The first job I applied for was at a small financial data startup wedged between a pawn shop and a pizza place. The sign outside was crooked, half the bulbs were out. It looked like a business that could collapse at any minute. Inside, a man named Chris interviewed me while eating beef jerky. He skimmed my flimsy resume with a skeptical grunt. "You only have college experience," he said. "Can you handle pressure?" I wanted to laugh. Pressure was growing up in a house where silence was punishment and success was mandatory. Pressure was listening to Margot list all the ways I failed at being a Grant. Pressure was being told at 18 that the only job I was suited for was supporting my sister. "Yes," I said. "I can handle it." He shrugged. "Fine, show up Monday." That was it. No long speeches, no patronizing warnings, no thinly veiled insults wrapped in polite smiles. Just a chance. The office was small, the kind where everyone sat elbow to elbow and could hear every stomach growl after noon. On my first day, no one bothered to learn my name. Someone pointed vaguely at an empty desk near the back. "That's yours." I sat down, powered up the computer, and started reading through the reports assigned to me. By noon, I found a glaring mismatch in the budget sheets. By 2, I found a second. By 4, I uncovered an entire misallocated expense chain no one had noticed. When I brought it to Chris, he blinked at me, confused. "How'd you catch that?" "It didn't add up," I said. He snorted. "Most people don't look that close." I shrugged. "I'm not most people." I expected praise. Maybe a good job. Something. Instead, he handed the papers to another analyst and walked away. That was my first taste of the Detroit version of injustice. In Boston, injustice was sophisticated. It hid behind good manners and practiced smiles. In Detroit, it wore sweatshirts and had coffee stains on its spreadsheets. No one stole credit because they wanted prestige. They stole it because they could. A week later, a coworker named Evan swaggered up to my desk. He was the kind of person who believed confidence could replace competence. "Hey," he said, leaning against my chair. "Heard you like cleaning up messy files. You want to help me with one?" He meant do the work he didn't want to do. But I was new, desperate, still hopeful. "Send it over," I said. I stayed late that night correcting his numbers. He presented the completed model the next morning to the team. "This," he announced, "is what happens when you put in real effort." No mention of me, not even a glance. Something inside me tightened, not quite anger, not yet, but a simmering awareness, a warning. People like Evan were everywhere. They thrived when others stayed quiet. I wasn't quiet forever. The one person who noticed me was Sheila Ramos, the CFO. She was sharp, efficient, and had a way of looking at a room as though she already knew where every weakness lived. On a Tuesday afternoon, she stopped at my desk and tapped a file. "You spotted a vendor misclassification last week," she said. "How?" "It didn't match the pattern," I replied. Her eyes sharpened. "Show me." I walked her through the discrepancies. She watched my hands move across the spreadsheet with surprising intensity. "You see what others miss," she said finally. "Don't let this place dull that." Her words were simple, but they struck something deep. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't telling me to shrink. Someone wasn't telling me to stay quiet. Someone wasn't trying to mold me into a reflection of my sister. Someone saw me. Later that week, Sheila handed me a confidential internal report. "Read this closely. Don't react yet," she instructed. "There's a bigger problem under the numbers." I read it that night in my tiny room, the radiator hissing angrily behind me. She was right. The inconsistencies weren't just sloppy accounting. They were strategic. Someone was burying liabilities inside shell categories, hoping no one would dig deep enough to expose them. Detroit wasn't just chaotic. It was corrupt in small, unpolished ways. I didn't sleep well. My brain kept replaying the implication. Someone wanted to hide the truth. Evan proved it the next morning. When a senior client report went bad, he pointed at me before I even walked into the conference room. "Harper made the changes last. Must have been her. I stared at him, stunned. I had never touched that file. My face burned as the team glanced at me, some curious, some disinterested, some clearly eager to let someone else take the blame. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Sheila stepped in. "Enough," she said, her voice slicing through the tension. "I reviewed the file last night. The mistakes weren't hers." Evan flushed, mumbling an excuse before retreating. That was the moment I realized how fragile corporate loyalty was, how power shifted not with truth, but with who spoke loudest. And I was so damn tired of being quiet. But living like this, barely scraping by, constantly proving myself, feeling my lungs tighten each time I walked into work, wondering who would try to pin their failures on me, started to wear me down. The cold seeped into my bones. The isolation weighed on me at night. Detroit had sharpened me, but sharpening hurts. When the landlord told me my rent was going up, because winter's coming and heat costs money, I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly. My Detroit chapter was reaching its limit. One evening, Sheila stopped by my desk while slipping on her coat. "You're too good for this place," she said quietly. "Chicago's where the real work is. Their firms will eat you alive, but they'll pay you for it." "Chicago?" I repeated. She nodded. "A friend owes me a favor. I can get your resume on the right desk." I didn't say yes right away. Instead, I walked home through the bitter wind, my duffel bag digging into my shoulder, my toes numb through my boots. I reached my room, unlocked the door, and sat on the edge of the mattress staring at the wall. I wasn't afraid of hard work. I wasn't afraid of pressure. I wasn't even afraid of failure. I was afraid of becoming the version of myself my father expected. Quiet, obedient, forgettable. Chicago wasn't just a city. It was an escape hatch. And maybe the next test. That night, as I packed my bag, a slip of paper fell from the inside pocket of my worn coat. It was old, creased at the edges. I didn't remember putting it there. It was my mother's handwriting. "Don't let anyone decide your worth." My throat tightened. My fingers trembled as I folded the paper back into my palm. That message, her message, felt like a hand reaching across the years, steadying me. Detroit had carved me into something leaner, sharper, harder. But Chicago would forge me. I zipped my bag, stood up, and glanced at the window. Snow was falling gently over the city that had both bruised and taught me. By dawn, I was on a bus headed west. As the skyline faded behind me, I leaned my forehead against the cold glass and whispered to myself, "I'm not done falling yet, but I'm finally learning how to rise." The train slid into Chicago under a ceiling of gray clouds, the kind that looked heavy enough to crush the skyline. I stepped onto the platform with the same worn duffel, the same too-thin coat, and a heart caught somewhere between fear and a stubborn, reckless hope. Detroit had shaped me. But Chicago felt like a test I might not survive. The air bit at my cheeks as I walked out of the station, pulling my coat tighter. Taxis honked. People moved fast, purposeful, like everyone had somewhere important to be. I didn't. Not yet. I found a room to rent in a walk-up on the south side. Peeling wallpaper, creaky floors, and a landlord who only spoke through the crack of his barely opened door. The bathroom down the hall smelled like bleach and old pipes. My window overlooked a brick wall so close I could almost touch it. But it was mine. And that was enough. My first interview came the next day. Sheila had pushed my resume to her contact, a mid-size financial analytics firm headquartered in a glass building near the river. I spent the night ironing my single professional outfit, black slacks, a button-down shirt, and a blazer that didn't quite fit my shoulders. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist looked at me like she was trying to place whether I belonged. I ignored the flicker of judgment and forced my voice steady as I said my name. They escorted me to a conference room with a long table and 2 bright lights. I sat alone for 5 minutes, staring at the city below, reminding myself that I had already survived worse than rejection. The door opened. The woman who walked in looked like she'd been forged out of steel and discipline. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, her suit tailored, her eyes sharp enough to cut. She introduced herself as Elaine Carver, Senior Managing Director. She sat, didn't smile. "Your resume," she said, sliding the paper across the table, "is unusual." That could have meant anything. Unusual good, unusual bad. I didn't flinch. "Unusual how?" "High performance in small firms," she replied. "A lot of grunt work, a lot of cleaning other people's messes." "That's accurate," I said. She leaned back. "And now you're applying for a mid-level analyst position that requires precision, endurance, and confidence." "I have all three." She steepled her fingers. "You don't look like someone who's been groomed for this." "No one groomed me for survival either," I said quietly, "but I learned anyway." A flicker, barely visible, moved across her expression. Interest, maybe respect, hard to tell. She opened a folder and slid a stack of documents toward me. Spreadsheets, projections, a tangled mess of financial modeling errors. "Fix these," she said. "You have 20 minutes. I didn't hesitate. I spread the papers across the table, grabbed a pen, and began to work. My pulse steadied as the numbers flowed into place. Patterns emerged. Inconsistencies shone under the fluorescent light like weak spots in armor. When time was up, I slid the papers back to her. She skimmed the first page, then the second. Then she set the pen down with a soft click. "I've never seen anyone catch that particular error," Elaine said. "Even my senior analysts miss it." "Because they assume the data is right," I said. "I don't assume anything." She closed the folder. "You start Monday." I walked out of that building, lighter than I had in months. Not happy, not triumphant, but anchored. Like I had placed one foot on firmer ground. My first day at Carver Analytics hit me like a storm. The office buzzed with relentless energy. Phones ringing, printers humming, analysts rushing between departments with stacks of files. I was assigned a desk near the window, though the view was mostly of another skyscraper's concrete side. My team consisted of 5 analysts, all of whom eyed me with thinly veiled skepticism. The newest hire was always a threat, a potential competitor, or a future scapegoat. By noon, I'd already learned their dynamics. Ryan, the smirking golden boy with perfect hair, liked to explain things I already understood. Chelsea, sharp as a needle, watched everyone with hawk-like calculation. Derek, quiet, tired, probably one bad week away from quitting, kept his head down. And Maya, the only one who smiled genuinely, seemed exhausted in a way that told me she had too much talent and not enough power. None of them wanted the newcomer to disrupt the hierarchy. Too bad. My first assignment was a small client audit, something meant to test my competence without risking much. But the deeper I dug, the more uneasy I became. The vendor payments didn't align. The expense classifications shifted with no explanation. The projections seemed artificially inflated. I stared at the numbers until the answer clicked into place. Someone had manipulated the data. On my second week, I took my findings to Elaine. She listened silently as I outlined the discrepancies. When I finished, she tapped her finger on the desk. "Which analyst handled this before you?" "Ryan," I said. She inhaled slowly. "Of course." My shoulders stiffened. Was I supposed to ignore this? "No," she said. "You were supposed to find it, and you did." Her gaze held mine. "But be careful, Harper. Exposing incompetence makes enemies." "I've had those my whole life," I said. "I'm not afraid of more." "Good," she murmured. "You'll need that." The fallout began the next day. Ryan cornered me in the hallway. "You trying to make me look bad?" "You did that yourself," I replied. He stepped closer, voice sharpening. "Listen carefully. People like you don't last long here. You're temporary, you're replaceable." "So are you," I said, walking away. I felt his glare burn into my back. That night, I stayed late at my desk, finishing a weekly report. The office emptied until it was just me, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the city's glow spilling in through the window. I didn't hear the footsteps until someone spoke behind me. You're making noise. It was Maya, clutching a mug of tea. I blinked. Noise? She pointed to the spreadsheet glowing on my monitor. Word travels fast. Ah, I murmured. That kind of noise. She sat on the edge of my desk. Just be ready. Ryan can't stand the thought of someone outperforming him, especially a woman he can't talk down to. I'm not here to compete with him, I said. Her smile was faint. That's what scares him. Over the next month, I took on more assignments, more late nights, more messy files no one else wanted. I didn't complain, not because I enjoyed being buried alive, but because I knew the truth. If I didn't take the work, someone else would weaponize it against me. My reputation grew in small, quiet ways. When someone needed an analysis double-checked, they came to me. When something didn't add up, they whispered my name. I wasn't visible, but I was essential, the kind of worker companies rely on without ever acknowledging. I recognized the pattern. Detroit had taught me the blueprint. Chicago perfected it. One night, I was reviewing a complex acquisition project when I found a pattern that didn't belong. It wasn't an obvious mistake. It was subtle, smart, almost invisible. Someone was hiding a liability deep inside a chain of adjustments. If the acquisition went through, it would blow up spectacularly. I stared at the numbers, heart hammering. This wasn't sloppiness, this was sabotage. I printed the file, highlighted every red flag, and walked straight to Elaine's office. It was nearly 9, but she was still there, as if she hadn't left her chair all day. She read quietly, eyes narrowing. Then she looked up. This discovery, she said slowly, could prevent a disaster. Or expose someone powerful, I replied. Her gaze sharpened. You understand the risk? I do. And you're bringing it to me anyway? I nodded. Because it's the truth. She closed the folder, fingers tapping the cover. Go home, sleep. Tomorrow will be interesting. It was. By noon the next day, the partner who managed the acquisition, Ralph Morrison, was escorted out of the building. No dramatic scene, no shouting, just a firm, undeniable end. Rumors spread like wildfire. Someone had caught his manipulation. Someone had dismantled a scheme that could have cost the firm millions. Someone no one saw coming. Ryan glared at me the rest of the day. Chelsea stared like she was recalibrating her understanding of who I was. Maya squeezed my arm and whispered, "Good." But the person whose reaction mattered most was Elaine. At 5:30, she called me into her glass-walled office. The door shut behind me with a quiet click. You did more than find an error, she said. You protected this firm. I swallowed slowly. I only followed the data. A lot of people see the data, she said. You understood what it meant. Her expression softened. Not warmth exactly, but something close. Harper, she said, leaning back. Have you ever considered that your ability isn't just analytical? It's instinct, pattern recognition, people recognition. I learned that from necessity. I know, she replied, and necessity builds sharper instincts than privilege ever will. Her words sat heavily in the room. Then she slid an envelope across the desk. What's this? I asked. A ticket to a private investment roundtable next Friday, in Oakwood Tower. My breath caught. Oakwood Tower wasn't just any building. It was a place where major investors, real power, made decisions the public never saw. Why me? I asked. Because you need to meet people who will shape your future, she said, and because someone there asked to see you. Who? She smiled faintly. A name you'll recognize soon enough. I left her office with the envelope clutched in my hand, adrenaline buzzing under my skin. The city lights outside glimmered through the cold glass, shimmering like a map of possibilities. The world was shifting under my feet. And for once it was shifting toward me, not away. That night, lying in my narrow bed with the envelope resting on my chest, I realized something. My father had tried to clip my wings by throwing me out. But exile hadn't weakened me, it had forged me, and Chicago was only the beginning. I didn't know what to expect when Friday night arrived. The envelope Elaine had given me felt heavier than paper should, as if the weight of my future had been stitched into its seams. I stared at it all week, on my desk beside my coffee mug, folded into the inside pocket of my coat, wondering what waited on the other side of that invitation. By the time I stood in front of Oakwood Tower, my breath clouding in the sharp Chicago air, I still didn't know. The building gleamed against the night sky, 40 stories of glass and steel, lit from within like a beacon calling only the chosen. Men in tailored suits and women in dresses worth more than a car swept through the revolving doors without hesitation. I hesitated. I pulled my coat tighter, acutely aware that it was one shade too faded, one winter too worn. A part of me whispered that I didn't belong here. A larger part whispered back that I'd earned this. Inside, marble floors reflected warm golden light. A concierge directed me toward a private elevator reserved for tonight's event. I stepped in, the doors closing with a soft sigh. As the elevator rose, my pulse climbed with it. When the doors opened, I found myself in a high-ceilinged reception room overlooking the glittering river. A bar lined one wall, while small clusters of people murmured over glasses of dark liquor and thin-stemmed wine. No name tags, no signs. Just power congregating quietly, choosing who to acknowledge and who to ignore. I stayed near the edge of the room, studying the crowd. I recognized a real estate mogul whose face appeared on magazine covers, a senator whose voice I'd heard in congressional hearings, and a CEO whose company's stock price could sway the market with a single earnings call. This wasn't a networking event. This was a gate, a test. Choices made here wouldn't appear on any record, but they would determine futures for years. I hadn't been here 5 minutes when a familiar voice slid into my ear. "You look like you're casing the room." I turned sharply. Maya stood beside me, wearing a navy dress that transformed her usual exhaustion into something luminous. Her smile was small but real. "I didn't know you'd be here," I breathed. "I wasn't invited," she said. "Elaine needed someone she trusts to help with logistics. So, volunteer staff badge and I'm in." Her eyes sparkled mischievously as she looked around. "Honestly, I wanted to see this mythical gathering for myself." I exhaled, relieved to have a friendly face. "You'll be fine," she said, squeezing my wrist. "Just don't let anyone intimidate you. Half these people are dangerous only because everyone else tells them they are." She slipped away before I could respond, leaving me feeling both steadier and more uncertain. I scanned the room again, trying to guess which person had asked to see me. And then I saw him. Standing near the tall windows, one hand in his pocket, speaking quietly to a woman twice his age, was the man whose name I knew long before I'd ever thought our paths could cross. Lucas Hawthorne. He didn't look powerful in a loud way, not like my father, who wore arrogance like a cologne. Lucas carried himself differently, quietly, precisely, with an economy of movement that suggested nothing he did was accidental. His dark hair was swept neatly back. His suit was midnight black and tailored so well it looked like a second skin. His posture was relaxed, but something in the line of his shoulders told me he noticed everything. The woman beside him laughed softly. Lucas smiled, a small, controlled motion, and the room shifted its attention subtly, as though compassing toward him. I knew of him, of course. Anyone in finance did. He was the man who turned collapsing companies into miracles, who negotiated mergers so quietly and efficiently that people wondered if he could read minds. He was the man whose signature on a check could resurrect a dying market. I swallowed. What was a man like that doing here with my name in his head? As I watched him, his gaze drifted lazily, and then landed on me. It wasn't the polite glance of acknowledging a stranger, it was recognition. My pulse jumped. He excused himself from the conversation with the woman, nodding once, then walked toward me with an unhurried confidence that made me feel pinned in place. I held my breath without meaning to. He stopped a comfortable distance in front of me. Miss Grant, he said, his voice low and even. I was hoping you'd come. My throat tightened. How did you— Elaine Carver speaks very selectively, he said. When she gives someone her attention, I pay attention. I was suddenly aware of how small my coat looked, how ordinary my shoes were, how unpolished the edges of my life still felt. But he didn't examine me the way Boston would have. He didn't look at my clothes. He looked directly at me, eyes steady, taking measure, not inventory. I'm surprised, I admitted. I didn't know you knew my name. His mouth curved very slightly. Names matter less to me than the work behind them, and your work has made its way to people who matter. The heat rose in my chest. I forced myself not to look away. You have a particular instinct, he continued. Pattern recognition, risk identification, anomaly detection. A rare set of skills. I swallowed. I just do my job. No, he said, his tone softening as though correcting a child gently. You do what most people can't, or won't. He gestured toward the balcony doors. Walk with me. I hesitated, but he waited calmly for me to decide, giving me the dignity of choice. It struck me as odd how someone so powerful could be so patient. I nodded. We stepped onto the balcony overlooking the river. The wind was colder here, but the view was breathtaking. Chicago's lights flickered across the water, reflections warping with the current. He rested his hands on the railing. Do you know why these round tables exist? To connect investors? To evaluate people, he corrected. Quietly, precisely, intentionally. The world doesn't rise on money. It rises on judgment. He glanced at me. And judgment is what you're exceptionally good at. I blinked. I wasn't aware anyone noticed. People notice the wrong things all the time, he said. Your coworkers saw a threat. Your father saw a disappointment. I see leverage, capability, vision. His words slid under my ribs like heat. I forced myself to breathe. I haven't done anything significant yet. You prevented a catastrophic acquisition last month. I stared at him. How do you know about that? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the river as the wind caught his hair. Because, he said finally, the man who orchestrated that acquisition has been trying to hide similar liabilities for years. Your discovery exposed more than you realize. My stomach tightened. I wasn't trying to cause damage. You didn't, he said. You revealed truth. What others do with truth is their choice. The door behind us opened. Elaine stepped outside. Lucas, she said in greeting, then turned to me. Everything all right? He nodded. We're fine. She looked at me for a beat longer than necessary, as if assessing whether I was overwhelmed. I straightened. Elaine turned to him. Your presence tonight is causing quite a disturbance. It usually does, he replied mildly. And yet you came, she said. He didn't glance at me, but something in the air shifted, an acknowledgement hovering between them. For her, he said simply. My breath caught. Elaine hid her reaction well, but she looked at me with a flicker of new understanding. I see, she murmured. She left us alone again. I gripped the railing to steady myself. Why me? For now, he said. Let's call it curiosity. Curiosity, I repeated. And potential, he added. You're standing at the edge of something bigger than you know. I'm offering you insight, guidance, and when you're ready, opportunity. I don't know if I hesitated. The right person for that. He turned fully to face me. The wind pulled at his jacket, but he stood steady, rooted, immovable. You doubt yourself because others taught you to, he said. Not because you lack reason to trust your own instincts. The truth of that hit somewhere old and raw. He looked at me for a long moment, as though waiting for me to absorb it. From inside, the muffled sound of renewed conversation drifted across the balcony. Music swelled, glasses clinked, the city hummed below us. I'm leaving soon, he said. But you should stay, observe, learn who in that room speaks value and who only speaks noise. He slid a sleek business card from his pocket and set it gently on the railing beside my hand. "When you reach the stage where you're ready to build something bigger than Carver Analytics can contain," he said, "call me." The card gleamed in the city light. No title, no office address. Just his name and a single number. I stared at it, then at him. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked back inside without looking back. I stood on the balcony long after he disappeared into the crowd. The cold seeped through my jacket, but I barely felt it. Because for the first time, not just in Chicago, but in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was being seen. I felt like I was being chosen. And that terrified me far more than failure ever had. When I finally walked back inside, the room had changed. Not visibly, but in the way people looked at me. Not directly, not obviously, but enough that I felt it. A shift in attention, a shift in possibility, a shift in me. As I moved through the room, Maya intercepted me with wide eyes. "Harper, what did he want? What did Lucas Hawthorne want with you?" I closed my fingers around the card in my pocket. "Nothing," I said softly. "Not yet." But I knew better. Something had begun on that balcony. Something I wasn't prepared for. Something I couldn't walk away from now. The city glittered below, as if waiting for me to choose my direction. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt inevitable. The morning after the Oakwood Tower event, Chicago felt different. Not warmer, not friendlier, but sharper, as if the city itself had drawn a line and was waiting to see whether I'd step across it. I woke before sunrise, sitting upright in my narrow bed with Lucas's card still resting on the nightstand. The single line of embossed text gleamed faintly in the early light. It might as well have been a detonator. I didn't touch it. I didn't trust myself to. Instead, I forced myself into routine. Coffee brewed in the tiny machine that sputtered angrily, a lukewarm shower that never fully heated, and a walk to the train through air that cut like glass. But my mind wasn't with me. It was back on that balcony, replaying the calm certainty in Lucas's voice, the effortless confidence with which he'd said he'd been waiting for me. I didn't believe in fate, but something dangerous had begun, and I could feel it in my bones. At the office, things were strange. When I walked in, the usual morning chatter dipped. Ryan stopped mid-sentence. Chelsea tracked me from over her coffee cup. Even Derek looked up from his computer, an event rare enough to mark on a calendar. "What?" I said, lowering myself into my chair. Chelsea set her cup down slowly. "Elaine wants to see you." My stomach tightened. "Now?" "She's been waiting since 8. I glanced at the clock. 8:05. Great. When I stepped into her office, she didn't motion for me to sit. She stood near the windows with her arms crossed, staring down at the river as if she needed its movement to steady her thoughts. "Close the door." The click behind me sounded like a seal locking. She turned. "I assume you know why you're here." "No," I said honestly. Elaine lifted a brow. "Not even a guess?" "I'm sure you'll tell me." She studied me for a moment, deciding whether to skin me alive or hand me a promotion. Her expression didn't give me any clues. "Last night," she said finally, "your presence caused a reaction." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You didn't just attend the event, Harper. You disrupted it." "I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything." "You breathed," she snapped. "And apparently that was enough." My jaw clenched. "I don't understand." She exhaled, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You spoke with Lucas Hawthorne." "That wasn't my choice," I said quickly. "He approached me." "That's worse." The words landed like a weight dropped on my chest. Elaine paced once, then stopped. "Do you know how many CEOs he speaks to in a year? How many investors? How many analysts?" "No." "Less than 30, out of thousands." My breath stalled. "And he chose you." I felt the ground tilt subtly, like the world was shifting beneath my feet, and I wasn't sure how to brace myself. "Why does that matter?" I said quietly. Because people in that room noticed, and because power follows curiosity, and because half the investors are already asking about you this morning. My head jerked up. What? They want to know who you are, where you came from, why Hawthorne gave you his time. Her lips thinned. They want to know what you are. I frowned. That's ridiculous. No, she said. That's influence, the kind you don't ask for, the kind you don't control, the kind that can destroy you if you mishandle it. I swallowed. What am I supposed to do? For now, absolutely nothing. That's not a strategy. It is, she said, when the alternative is becoming the target of every ambitious person in this firm. She walked back behind her desk, folded her hands, and said something I wasn't prepared for. I'm protecting you. I blinked at her. Why? Because someone protected me once, she said simply. And because despite your stubborn insistence otherwise, you're not ready for the kind of attention you just attracted. Heat crawled up my neck. I didn't attract anything. You did, she said. By being good, by being sharp, by being the kind of analyst who sees what others ignore. Her eyes pinned me to the carpet. And by having a story people don't know how to categorize. My heart thudded. What story? She nodded once. Exactly. No one knows. No one can place you. And that is dangerous. I didn't respond. Couldn't respond. She sat back. For the next few weeks, you stay quiet. You don't mention Hawthorne. You don't mention last night. And you certainly don't use that card. My pulse kicked painfully. I wasn't planning to. You will, she said with certainty that made me flinch. One day, but not now. A knock interrupted us. Come in, she called. The door opened, and Ryan stepped inside, wearing a smile so fake it could have been painted on. Sorry to interrupt, he said smoothly. I just wanted to let you know that the Arlington account needs an updated risk analysis. Elaine stared at him. And why are you telling me this? He clasped his hands. Because I'd like Harper to handle it. My stomach dropped. Ryan never gave anything away without a trap hidden inside it. Elaine didn't blink. Harper has other assignments. Of course, he said, feigning disappointment. I just thought she could use the visibility. Elaine's tone turned acidic. She doesn't need your help with visibility. The corner of his mouth twitched. I thought I'd offer. Elaine dismissed him with a flick of her hand. When the door shut, she turned to me. He's going to test you, she warned. He thinks you're rising too fast. He'll try to pull you apart piece by piece. I nodded, jaw tightening. I've dealt with men like him my entire life. You dealt with them, she said. Now you need to outmaneuver them. She leaned forward. Don't make yourself a bigger target than you already are. I walked out of her office with my heart pounding, feeling the walls shift around me. Because she was right. People had noticed. And not in a way that made me feel safe. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I kept my head down, worked my files, and ignored the lingering stares. At 5, I packed my things and bundled up against the cold. As I stepped outside, snow had begun to fall, soft at first, then heavier, building rapidly across the sidewalks. I pulled out my gloves and felt the edge of the card in my pocket. I didn't take it out, but its presence made my chest tighten. I walked toward the train station, but halfway there, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I didn't. Hello? Harper. The voice froze me mid-step. Lucas. I gripped the phone tighter. How did you get this number? Elaine, he said simply. I swallowed. Why are you calling me? To follow up, he said, and to make sure you got home last night. I stared at the falling snow. I'm fine. You don't sound fine. I'm busy, I said, hating the way my voice wavered. You're overwhelmed, he corrected gently. I closed my eyes. Why did you talk to me last night? I asked. Out of everyone there, why me? There was a soft pause. the sound of breath through the line. "Because I know what potential looks like before it fully forms," he said. "And because I don't waste time watching people who won't matter." The wind whipped around me, snow stinging my cheeks. "And I matter?" I whispered. "To yourself, yes," he said. "But one day you'll matter to everyone else, too." I didn't breathe for a moment. Then he said, more quietly, "Be careful with the way people look at you now. They'll pretend curiosity is kindness. It isn't." My throat tightened. What am I supposed to do? "For now," he echoed Elaine's words, "nothing." That's becoming a theme. It's the only strategy that works until you're strong enough to choose otherwise. My fingers trembled around the phone. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he added. "Just don't doubt yourself." And then the line clicked. He was gone. I stood in the snow long after, shivering, watching my breath drift into the night. My past was still trying to bury me. My present was trying to reshape me. And my future, whatever it was, had just begun pressing up against the edges of my life, testing the structure, looking for a way in. When I finally boarded the train, the windows fogged from heat inside. I pressed my forehead against the glass. For the first time since leaving Boston, I felt something new. Fear, yes. But beneath it, something brighter, something alive. A sense that my life was no longer drifting forward. It was accelerating, and I had no idea where I was being taken. The weeks after Lucas's call were some of the strangest of my life. Quiet on the surface, volatile underneath, like the city had trapped its breath and was waiting to see what I would become. Everything looked the same from the outside, the same crowded trains, the same icy sidewalks, the same cramped apartment with pipes that screamed every time the water turned on. But the air around me felt charged, as if the smallest decision could set off a chain reaction. I tried to disappear back into routine. I arrived at the office early, left late, kept my head down, and avoided anything that even hinted at attention. But attention has a way of finding the people who don't want it. And by my third week back at work, it was clear something had shifted. People watched me now, not openly, not obviously, but enough that I could feel their eyes on my back when I walked by. The first real sign of trouble came on a Monday morning. I had barely set my bag down at my desk when Ryan sauntered over, leaning against the divider like he owned the floor. "Morning, superstar," he said. I didn't flinch. "What do you want?" His grin sharpened. "Elaine assigned you to the Harborview account, didn't she?" "Yes." "Big responsibility," he said, feigning admiration. "A lot of pressure. A lot of potential for embarrassment." There it was, the threat behind the smile. I held his gaze. "If you're hoping I'll fail, you'll get bored waiting." His jaw tensed. "We'll see." He walked away, but the warning stayed behind like the stale scent of his cologne. Harborview was a huge deal, significant assets, complex reporting structures, and the kind of financial knots that took weeks to unravel. Normally it would have gone to a senior analyst, but Elaine had handed it to me with a single sentence. "You need something that challenges you and exposes others." Those were the kinds of words that could get someone killed in a place like this. I spent days combing through the files, mapping out inconsistencies like a detective tracking a serial pattern. And the deeper I dug, the more uneasy I became. Something wasn't just wrong, something was being concealed. Transactions were offsetting each other too neatly. Expenses were masked under vague cost centers. The projection model had a smoothness no real business ever achieved. Someone was hiding chaos behind manufactured calm. My stomach twisted. I'd seen this kind of trick once before. In Detroit, different players, same game. But who was doing it here? By Wednesday night, the office had emptied, leaving only the hum of lights and the soft clicking of my own keyboard. I stretched my neck, rubbing the soreness, and leaned closer to the screen. The numbers painted a story I couldn't ignore. Harborview was propping itself up with borrowed time and borrowed money, And if the firm pushed the acquisition, it would explode. The realization hit like ice water. I printed the files, highlighted the patterns, and gathered everything into a single binder. Tomorrow I would bring it to Elaine, but tomorrow came with something else. The next morning, as I reached my desk, I stopped. My computer was already on, and my Harborview files, every note, every highlight, every spreadsheet, were missing. My breath caught in my throat. I checked my drawers. My binder, my folders. Gone. Panic flickered at the edges of my vision, sharp and disorienting. Someone had gone through my desk, someone new. I stood there frozen, heart pounding against my ribs, until Maya appeared at my side. "You're pale," she said softly. "What happened?" "My files," I whispered. "Harborview, they're gone." Her eyes widened. "Gone as in misplaced, or gone as in aimed at my back?" She inhaled sharply. "You think Ryan—" "I think someone doesn't want me to have proof." She placed a hand on my arm. "Harper, you need to go to Elaine." "I need to find the files first." Maya shook her head. "No, you don't understand. If someone's trying to bury your work, they're preparing a trap. You walking into it blind is exactly what they want." I swallowed hard. "Why me?" "Because you see things you're not supposed to see." Her words echoed Lucas's from that night on the balcony. "People don't fear your skills, Harper. They fear what you see." I forced myself to breathe. Panicking wouldn't help. I needed to think, to stay sharp, to find out where the missing pieces went. An hour later, I was still searching, digitally, manually, mentally, scrubbing through backup folders, system logs, anything that might reveal who'd accessed my files. And that was when Elaine summoned me. "Close the door," she said the moment I stepped inside. I did. My pulse throbbed. She folded her arms. "I have to ask you a direct question." "Okay." "Did you alter any Harborview documentation?" I froze. "No." Her stare sharpened. "Did you share anything from that account?" "No." She inhaled slowly. "Then explain to me why a set of revised Harborview files with your digital signature were sent to the senior partners last night." My mind went blank. "What?" "The revisions claimed Harborview's numbers were stable, that the discrepancies were minor, that the acquisition was safe." "But that's not true," I said, stomach dropping. "I never wrote that." "Someone used your credentials." "I didn't authorize it. I didn't—" She held up a hand. "Stop. I know you didn't." My knees nearly buckled from relief. Elaine walked around her desk until she stood directly in front of me. "You are being targeted," she said. "Someone wants you off that account." "Ryan," I said instantly. She shook her head. "Ryan's a parasite, not a strategist. This is someone with access, someone higher." My mouth went dry. "Why would they go after me?" "Because you're too good. You dug too deep. You found something that wasn't meant to be found." My hands trembled. "What do I do?" "For now, nothing." Again that cursed word. "You stay on Harborview officially," she said. "But you do your real work off the system, on paper, by hand, where no one can touch it." I swallowed. "Okay. And you let me handle whoever is trying to undermine you." I believed her. But fear settled deep in my ribs like cold iron. I returned to my desk and spent the afternoon rebuilding what had been stolen. Not on my computer, never again. I used sheets of paper, a calculator, and my instincts. Around 5, Maya approached me with a concerned look. "I heard something," she murmured. "What?" "That there's a meeting tomorrow morning to reassess the Harborview projections, and Ryan is presenting." My stomach clenched. "If he presents your stolen data," she whispered, "he could tank you, make it look like you falsified everything." The dread hit me so hard it was almost physical. This wasn't rivalry. This was war. That night, I stayed until nearly midnight, rewriting every critical detail in longhand. When the cleaning crew arrived, I hid my papers in my bag and headed to the elevator. When the doors slid open, a security guard stepped out. He looked startled, then nervous. "Ms. Grant?" he said. "Yes?" "There was a request earlier. Someone asked if you were still in the building." My pulse stuttered. "Who?" He hesitated. "They didn't give a name." A chill rippled through me. "That's all," he said quickly. "Just thought you should know." I walked out into the cold night shaking. Every shadow felt too dark, every footstep behind me too loud. By the time I reached my apartment, my nerves were frayed. I locked the door twice. Then I sat on my bed and pulled out the papers, spreading them around me like a fortress of truth. Somewhere in those numbers was the key to why Harborview mattered, why someone wanted to bury it, why I had become a threat. I traced the columns with my fingertips, searching for what I had missed. And then I saw it. A pattern in the liabilities. A shell transfer. A repeating sequence of dates. Someone wasn't just hiding losses. Someone was laundering them through a silent subsidiary. And the partner responsible. My blood ran cold. It wasn't Ryan. It wasn't someone petty or jealous. It was someone with enough power to take down anyone who stood in the way. In the quiet of my room, with the radiator clanking like a broken heartbeat, I whispered the name out loud, and the sound of it made my hands go numb. I wasn't in over my head. I was drowning. But there was something else, too. A spark of defiance. The kind I'd carried since the day my father threw me out, calling me a disappointment. Since the day I stepped onto a Detroit sidewalk with nothing but grit and a duffel bag, I wasn't going to let them bury me, not again. I gathered the papers carefully and placed them in a thick folder, tucking it beneath my mattress. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't call Lucas, but I opened my messages and stared at his number. Not yet. Not until I had undeniable proof. Not until I understood the full danger. Not until I was ready. I set the phone down and lay back, staring at the dark ceiling. Tomorrow would be the first real battle. And if I wanted to survive Chicago, if I wanted to rise, I had to be sharper, faster, and far more ruthless than the people who wanted to destroy me. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. I wasn't afraid of them, not anymore. I was afraid of the part of myself that was beginning to wake up, the part that wanted to fight back and win. The conference room felt colder than the rest of the office, colder than Chicago's winter, colder than the fear twisting in my stomach. I arrived 10 minutes early, clutching my notebook like it was armor. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting pale reflections on the polished table. I could hear faint footsteps from the hallway as others began gathering for the Harborview meeting, the one that could determine whether I survived this firm or became its next quiet casualty. I sat at the far end of the table, choosing a chair where I could see everyone walk in. I needed eyes on every expression, every twitch, every flicker of tension that might reveal who was behind the sabotage. I pulled out my pen, even though my hands trembled slightly. Nerves weren't weakness. They were instinct sharpening itself. Ryan walked in first, as I knew he would. He wore a smug smile, the type that stretched too wide to be genuine. He saw me but didn't acknowledge me, his eyes sliding over me like I was invisible. His suit looked new, too new. People often dressed their best before delivering a betrayal. They liked to look good while ruining someone else's life. Next came Chelsea and Derek, whispering to each other. Derek kept glancing at me with nervous sympathy. Chelsea studied me like I was a puzzle she hadn't solved yet. Elaine entered last, a thick folder in her hands. Her expression was unreadable, calm, composed, lethal beneath the surface. When her eyes met mine, she held the gaze for a beat too long, silently reminding me, "Watch, listen, don't react." The door closed. The meeting began. "Thank you all for coming," said Mr. Walters, one of the senior partners. He adjusted his glasses and flipped through a packet in front of him. We're here to review the revised Harborview projections and assess whether we move forward with the acquisition timeline. My pulse hammered. Revised projections, the forged ones. Ryan, Walters continued, I believe you have the updated analysis. Of course, Ryan said brightly, standing and walking to the front of the room. Let's begin. He dimmed the lights and pulled up a slide deck. I recognized the formatting immediately. Polished enough to look official, polished enough to bury the truth under slick graphics. He clicked to the first slide. As we can see, Harborview is stabilizing after a period of volatility. Their long-term projections show strong growth potential. Lie. Slide 2. The short-term liabilities have already been addressed. Minor discrepancies, nothing structural. Another lie. Slide 3. Our risk exposure is minimal. A lie that could destroy the firm if believed. My throat tightened. Ryan's voice flowed smoothly, rehearsed, confident, perfect for someone presenting someone else's lies as his own brilliance. And every fact he cited was a dagger pointed at my career. Because if the partners believed these numbers, they'd approve the acquisition. And when the truth came out, as it inevitably would, they would trace those false projections back to the digital signature attached to them. Mine. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to keep my face neutral. My fingers dug into the underside of the table until my nails hurt. Halfway through the presentation, Elaine finally spoke. Ryan, she said calmly, could you elaborate on the methodology used to adjust the Q3 vendor liabilities? Ryan paused, but only for a heartbeat. Certainly. We reclassified a portion of the liabilities under development costs to better reflect Harborview's internal restructuring. And who recommended that reclassification? She asked. He blinked. The system flagged it. Elaine's lips twitched. The system flagged it. Ryan nodded confidently. The system that has been notoriously inaccurate with that specific account? She asked. A murmur passed around the table. Ryan's smile faltered. Elaine didn't smile. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, Interesting. He clicked to the next slide quickly, eager to move on. In summary, Harborview presents a strong... That's enough, Walters cut in, raising a hand. You can sit down. Ryan obeyed, though he shot a quick glare in my direction, as if somehow I was the one who'd stumbled. Walters turned toward me. Miss Grant, he said, you were originally assigned to Harborview. Do you have anything to add regarding these projections? The question was a knife disguised as an opportunity. Anything I said could make me look defensive. Anything I didn't say could be interpreted as agreement. I felt the weight of 20 eyes on me. I straightened slowly. I'd like to request clarification on the source documents used for these revisions. Walters frowned. Why? Because the numbers presented today do not match the inconsistencies I found while analyzing Harborview last week. Ryan stiffened. Walters leaned forward. Are you suggesting the discrepancies are significant? Yes, I said, extremely. Then where is your documentation? His tone sharpened, not hostile but assessing, testing. And I didn't have the documentation, it had been stolen, but I had something better. Here, I said, reaching into my notebook. I unfolded a page, just one page, handwritten the night before. A list of anomalies. Not too much, not enough to reveal everything, just enough to prove that the revised projections were impossible. This is a subset, I said, sliding it across the table. These numbers contradict the assumptions in the revised projections. Walters reviewed the sheet. Then another partner leaned over to look, and another. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. Walters pushed his glasses up. Ryan? Ryan paled. These must be old numbers. My notes are dated yesterday morning, I said evenly. Well, maybe she misinterpreted them, Ryan stammered. The shift in the room was subtle but unmistakable. Confidence was bleeding out of him. Elaine watched silently, her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharp with quiet satisfaction. Walters placed the paper down. This is a serious discrepancy. We need to halt the acquisition review until the source files are verified. Ryan's jaw clenched. With respect, Mr. Walters, I believe we should trust the revised documents. And I believe, Walters said coolly, that any analysis contradicting these projections must be investigated thoroughly. He shot a questioning look at Elaine. Your recommendation? She didn't even hesitate. We need a full internal review. Someone with fresh eyes should take lead. Walters nodded. Agreed. Then he turned to me. Miss Grant, effective immediately, you are appointed lead analyst on the Harborview investigation. The room went still. Ryan's face drained of color. Chelsea's eyebrows rose in shock. Derek exhaled, barely hiding his relief. And Elaine watched me with something softening at the edges of her expression. Approval, pride, something deeper. I swallowed hard. Thank you, I said quietly. But this wasn't a victory, not yet. Harborview wasn't just a financial mess. Someone powerful had created the mess and had tried to bury whoever dug it up. Now, I was in the crosshairs. When the meeting ended, people filed out silently, tension thick as smoke. Ryan stormed out without looking at me. Derek gave me a timid thumbs up. Chelsea hesitated by the door, studied me a moment, then left without speaking. Elaine lingered. She shut the door behind the last person and turned to me. Sit, she said. I obeyed. She leaned against the table, arms folded. You handled that well. I almost didn't, I admitted. But you did, she said. And that matters. I looked at my hands. They stole my files. I know. Her tone darkened. I checked the system logs myself. Someone wiped them at 2:30 a.m. using credentials I don't recognize. Ice crept down my spine. Who? Not Ryan. He doesn't have access. Then who? A partner, she said. I stared at her. A partner sabotaged me? No, she said. A partner is sabotaging the firm. You're collateral. My stomach twisted. Harborview is a cover, she continued. Someone is funneling liabilities into a private channel that won't survive due diligence. You found the cracks, and they're terrified. I swallowed painfully. What do? We gather evidence, she said. Quietly, carefully. And when the truth is undeniable, we present it in a room where no one can bury it. Her eyes met mine. And if you want... She hesitated, then added, I'll stand beside you. Emotion tightened my chest. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me, she said softly. Just don't get yourself eliminated. I nodded. She picked up her folder and headed for the door, but before she left, she turned back. And Harper? Yes? If Hawthorne contacts you again... Her tone shifted. Tell me. I nodded slowly, though my heart thudded hard. She left. I sat there alone, staring at the conference room walls, feeling the room tilt around me. I had just become lead analyst on the most dangerous account in the company. Someone with power wanted me silenced. I had no files, no allies beyond Elaine and Maya, and no idea who I was really up against. But for the first time since leaving Boston, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was stepping into something bigger, something risky, something inevitable. When I finally stepped out of the conference room, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered. Hello? Lucas's voice slid smoothly through the receiver. Congratulations. Cold spread through my chest. You knew. I predicted, he corrected. You're playing in deeper waters now, Harper. Try not to let the sharks smell fear. I'm not afraid, I said. Silence. Then, good, he said softly, because the next part is going to be harder. I exhaled shakily. Why are you helping me? I'm not helping you, he said. I'm watching you. A beat. Don't disappoint me. The line clicked. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. Up ahead, the office buzzed with quiet activity. Behind me, the shadows stretched long and dark. And in my pocket, the card he'd given me felt suddenly heavier. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and walked forward. The next move was mine, and I intended to make it count. I felt the pressure long before I saw it. It settled into the air of the office that Monday morning, dense, watchful, almost electric. People spoke in lower voices. Conversations cut off when I walked past. Doors closed faster. Screens were minimized quicker. It was the kind of shift that happens not when a rumor starts, but when the truth is getting too close for comfort. Harborview was no longer just a file on my desk. It was a threat to someone. And because I'd uncovered its cracks, I had become something else too, a liability. I arrived early, hoping for a quiet hour before the chaos began. Instead, I found a thick manila envelope sitting on my keyboard. No name, no return label, just a single object inside, heavy, stiff, and unmistakably deliberate. My stomach tightened. I sat down, slid the envelope open, and pulled out a glossy printed photo. Not a financial document, not a spreadsheet. A picture of me, leaving the office the night before, taken from across the street, taken by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. My breath stopped. A small sticky note was attached to the bottom corner. 3 words written in block letters. "Stop digging now." I stared at it long enough that the edges blurred. My heartbeat crawled into my ears. Someone wasn't just watching. Someone was warning me. Someone thought I scared them enough to threaten me. I wasn't sure whether to feel paralyzed or proud. Maya slid into the desk beside mine moments later, coffee in hand. She froze the second she saw my face. "What happened?" she whispered. I held out the picture. Her entire expression changed. "Oh my God, who gave you that? It was here when I got in." She snatched it from my fingers. This is insane." "It's a warning," I said quietly. "It's an intimidation tactic," she corrected, voice trembling with anger. "Harper, this is serious. You have to tell Elaine." I shook my head. "I need evidence, not fear. If I take this to her without proof, this is proof. No, this is tone." I took the picture back, sliding it into my drawer. It doesn't tell her anything except what we already know. Someone wants me gone. Maya leaned closer. "Then why keep going?" Her question lingered in the quiet space between us. Why keep going? Why not walk away before things escalated further? Because I had walked away once. From Boston. From my father's dismissal. From every place that treated me like a shadow. I'd left rather than fight. But that version of me was gone. "You know why?" I said softly. Maya looked at me, eyes heavy with worry. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I'll try," I said. She didn't look reassured. By 9:30, the office was filling fast. At 10, Elaine asked me to bring my Harborview findings to her office. I carried the paper files, the real ones, handwritten, and placed them on her desk. She scanned through them quickly, brows knitting tighter with each page. "This is worse than I expected," she said. "I know. This shell company, Pinegate Holdings, it's absorbing liabilities Harborview has no ability to cover." "Yes." She tapped the page, and the same signature approved every transfer. My stomach churned. "Do you recognize it?" "Yes," she said, "but you won't want to hear the name." Before she could speak, someone knocked on the door. The sound was light but decisive, like a judge tapping a gavel. "Come in," Elaine said. The door opened, and the air in the room changed. Standing in the doorway was the last person I expected to see inside Carver Analytics. Martin Price, partner, firm leader, the man whose signature was on the Pinegate Holdings transfers. He smiled at me, thin as a blade. "Elaine, Miss Grant." My fingers curled around my notes. Elaine's expression shifted into something polite and icy. "Martin, we're in the middle of a review." "So I heard," he said smoothly, stepping fully inside. "Harborview, yes? A tangled account, full of misunderstandings." "Not misunderstandings," I said quietly. "Manipulations." His eyes slid toward me. Interesting choice of words. Elaine stepped in. Harper has uncovered several inconsistencies. I'm sure she has, Martin said, voice dripping with patronizing warmth. Fresh eyes sometimes misinterpret complexity. I felt heat flare in my chest. This man had forged documents under my credentials. This man had been laundering losses through a shell setup. This man had nearly destroyed me, and the firm, just to preserve his own image. And now he wanted to call me inexperienced. He stepped closer to the desk. May I see your notes, Harper? No, I said. His eyes hardened. Just a fraction. Excuse me? They're not ready, I said. I'm still verifying. Elaine shot me a glance, half warning, half approval. Martin chuckled softly. Ah, I see we've developed confidence. I didn't blink. No, I've developed clarity. His smile thinned to nothing. Elaine stepped between us slightly. If you need something, Martin, request it through my office. He held her gaze a moment too long. A flicker of annoyance tightened his jaw. Of course, he said finally. I'll expect the completed report by Friday. He turned and walked out, closing the door gently behind him. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Elaine exhaled. It's him. I know. He won't go down quietly. I know that too. You need to be extremely careful, she said. He's powerful, connected, and he's protected by senior leadership. I'm not trying to take him down, I said. I'm trying to protect the firm. Elaine laughed once, no humor, just bitterness. In this world, those two things are the same. She pinched the bridge of her nose. We need a strategy. We need evidence, I said. More than numbers. Something irrefutable. Elaine nodded. Then you're not working alone. From this point forward, you bring everything to me first. I'll decide what goes up the chain. The knot in my chest loosened slightly. Thank you. She stood. This isn't gratitude, Harper. This is survival. I left her office and walked back to my desk, feeling a mixture of adrenaline, dread, and something else. Resolve. At noon, Maya appeared with sandwiches. Intervention, she said. You haven't eaten. I took the food reluctantly. She sat beside me, lowering her voice. I overheard something. I braced myself. What? Ryan's been meeting with Martin. My jaw clenched. Of course he has. They think you're going to expose something. They think you'll make noise. I'm not trying to make noise. But they don't know that, she said. All they know is that you're dangerous. I stared at her. Am I? Yes, she whispered, and that's why you have to be smarter than them. At 3, my inbox pinged. One new message. Subject, stop pursuing Harborview. The body was empty. No name, no signature. But the threat was loud. By 5, most of the office began thinning out. I stayed. My desk lamp cast long, lonely shadows across stacks of papers. I combed through transactions again, line by line, date by date. What was Martin hiding? Who else knew? Where was the weak point? At 6:30, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered before I could think to hesitate. It's me, Lucas said. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes briefly. How do you always call when things go wrong? I don't call when they go wrong, he said. I call when you're about to break something open. I swallowed. I think I just picked a fight with the wrong person. No, he said. You picked a fight with the person who needed to be fought. Fear prickled up my spine. He threatened me. He'll do worse, Lucas replied calmly. He's desperate. Cornered men lash out. Should I stop? I asked quietly. A beat of silence. No, he said. But you need to be strategic, tactical. Don't show your evidence yet. Let him believe he's winning. What if he destroys me first? He won't, Lucas said, because he doesn't know what you're capable of. Not yet. His voice softened. But I do. I exhaled shakily. I feel like I'm drowning. You're not drowning, he said. You're evolving. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. You sound very certain. I am, he said. And because you need to hear this, I don't want you to be afraid of him, or anyone in that building. I'm not afraid of him, I whispered. I'm afraid of what happens if I lose. You won't lose, he said, if you play the long game. I hesitated. Why do you care? Another pause. Then he said softly, because I've been watching someone like you rise my entire career, and every single time they change everything. My breath stilled. When do I call you? I asked. When you're ready, he said. You're close, not yet, but close. The line clicked off. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Not yet, but close. I gathered my papers, tucked them carefully into my bag, and rose from my desk. When I stepped outside, Chicago's night air hit me hard, cold, biting, and alive with the hum of invisible machinery. The city glowed under streetlights, sharp and metallic. I looked up at the tall buildings around me. Somewhere in the shadows, someone was plotting against me. Somewhere in the light, someone was waiting for me to become who they suspected I could be. And somewhere between those two forces, I walked, cold, determined, and no longer willing to disappear. Harborview was a battleground. Martin Price was an enemy. And I was no longer a girl trying to survive. I was the storm he didn't see coming. The next 48 hours felt like living inside the eye of a storm. Too calm on the surface, too violent underneath. Martin Price didn't confront me again, not directly. But the silence that followed our interaction was its own kind of threat, a calculated quiet meant to unsettle me more than any raised voice ever could. By Tuesday morning, the office atmosphere had shifted. People avoided my eyes. Conversations died when I walked past. Reports I normally received automatically weren't forwarded. Meetings I'd been invited to were suddenly rescheduled without me. Someone was isolating me, and they were doing it well. I sat at my desk reviewing line items for the 11th time when the first blow fell. At 10:14 a.m., an email hit my inbox. It was from a senior partner, someone who hadn't spoken to me directly in months. Subject: urgent. Audit irregularities connected to your work. My throat tightened. I opened the message carefully. Harper, we've received concerning information regarding inconsistencies in documents linked to your assignments. Please report to Conference Room D immediately. R. Daniels. My pulse hammered. This was it, the setup, the knife Martin had been waiting to slip between my ribs. I stood slowly, gripping my notebook hard enough to crease the cover. As I walked toward Conference Room D, I noticed people watching, not out of curiosity but anticipation, like they'd been told I was guilty, like they'd been waiting for the fall. I paused outside the door, inhaled once, and stepped inside. 4 people waited for me, 3 senior partners, and Martin Price. He sat at the head of the table, hands folded, the picture of professional disappointment. Miss Grant, Daniel said, gesturing to a seat. Please sit. I did. An issue has arisen, he continued, sliding a stack of documents toward me. Your accounts appear to contain conflicting financial entries. Martin leaned back in his chair, eyes half-lidded. Perhaps she's simply inexperienced, he mused, and she made errors. The room tightened around me. I stared down at the documents. Fabricated entries, adjustments I had never made. Signatures, not mine. Those aren't my changes, I said quietly. Daniels's brow arched. Your digital credentials were used. My credentials were compromised, I said. Someone used them to alter files. Do you have proof? He asked. Yes, I said. I do. Martin's eyes sharpened slightly. Elaine had taught me well. Never enter a battlefield without a weapon. I reached into my bag and pulled out a USB drive, the one containing screenshots of system logs showing unauthorized access into my profile at 2:30 in the morning. I slid it across the table. These logs show someone logged into my credentials from a terminal I've never used. Daniels inserted the drive into his laptop. Silence deepened as the file opened. Line after line of time-stamped evidence flashed across the screen. Unauthorized login, unauthorized file transfer, unauthorized edits. Everything tied not to my computer, but to a terminal inside the executive wing. A terminal only partners could access. A terminal Martin Price used. My heart thudded. Daniels leaned closer. This is concerning. Martin's expression didn't crack. Logs can be manipulated, he said smoothly. It seems oddly convenient she discovered these after being accused. I met his gaze. Only someone who knew I was being set up would assume I expected an accusation. His jaw tightened. Daniels rubbed his temple. Martin, were you working late Sunday night? Martin smiled thinly. Of course, Harborview has been demanding constant attention. Which, I said, is interesting because the terminal used for the unauthorized access was logged to your ID before you left the building. A flicker of irritation flashed behind Martin's eyes. He hadn't expected me to get the timestamps. Daniels looked between us. This will require a deeper internal audit. Martin stood, straightening his jacket. By all means, but don't let a junior analyst's panic derail. Enough, a voice said sharply from the doorway. Elaine stepped inside. What is the meaning of this? Martin snapped. I could ask the same, she said calmly, but instead I'll simply offer my recommendation. She placed 2 files on the table. This, she said, tapping the first file, is the independent review I performed last night on the Harborview data. Her gaze swept over the room. And this, she tapped the second file, is a record of transactions from Pinegate Holdings tied to unauthorized transfers approved by one individual. She slid the second file toward Daniels. He opened it. Air left the room. This signature... Martin, this is yours. The silence was catastrophic. Martin's expression remained controlled, but I saw panic flicker behind his composure like a crack in glass. It's a forgery, he hissed. Elaine raised a brow. Then you should contact Pinegate Holdings and ask them why they received directives from your email account, your sign-offs, and your terminal login. Daniels exhaled through his nose. Martin, we'll need your full cooperation for a separate audit. Martin's voice sharpened. This is absurd. We don't make accusations lightly, Daniels said. But the evidence is substantial, and until the audit is complete, you are relieved of all responsibilities related to Harborview. Martin froze. Relieved of responsibilities. He understood what that meant. His empire was beginning to crumble. His gaze darted to me, cold, vicious, a threat, a promise. Then he stormed out. The door slammed behind him. The partners dismissed me shortly after, offering curt nods of thanks. But nothing about this felt like victory. Not yet. Not when the man I'd just exposed was desperate and furious and still very much alive inside the firm. When I stepped into the hallway, Elaine joined me. Walk, she said. We crossed the office floor together, silent until we reached her office. Once inside, she shut the door and dropped her professional mask. You did well, she said. But we're not finished. I know. He'll try something else, she continued. Men like him don't accept consequences. I sat heavily in the chair across from her. What do we do next? Nothing, she said. Not yet. The audit will take weeks. We need to stay quiet. A familiar frustration rose in my chest. I'm tired of being quiet. I know, she said, but quiet keeps you alive. I lowered my gaze. Harper, she added, voice softening, you are stronger than you think. But strength without timing? That's how people get destroyed. I nodded slowly. Go home early, she said. Rest while you can. I didn't argue. I stepped outside into the freezing air, letting the cold settle into my lungs like a grounding force. I walked the 10 blocks home, snow crunching under my boots, my breath fogging into the night. But the moment I reached my apartment building, I stopped cold. My door was slightly open, just an inch, just enough to make my heart slam against my ribs. I swallowed, pushed the door open carefully, and stepped inside. Nothing was disturbed, nothing stolen, nothing broken, until I saw it. A single sheet of paper sitting on my bed. No envelope, no signature. Just 4 words typed in the center. You don't know anything. A chill raced through me. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out with trembling fingers. Another unknown number. Against every instinct, I answered. Hello? A deep voice, not Lucas, spoke on the other end. You should stop, the man said, before someone stops you. My throat closed. Who is this? Silence. Then the line went dead. My knees nearly buckled. I dropped onto the edge of the bed, the paper shaking in my hands. This was no longer office politics, no longer internal sabotage. Someone had been in my home. Someone wanted to terrify me into submission. Someone wanted me to disappear. I sat there for a long time, staring at the paper, breathing in shallow, uneven pulls. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out Lucas's card. The embossed letters gleamed under the dim lamp. Not yet, he had said. Not until I was ready. I closed my hand around the card, and for the first time, I felt ready. Not because I wanted to be, but because I had no choice. The war had followed me home, and if I wanted to survive it, I needed someone who knew the battlefield better than I did. Tomorrow the fight would continue. Tonight, I allowed myself one truth. I wasn't alone anymore, and the people who wanted me gone had just made their worst mistake yet. I didn't sleep that night. I lay fully dressed on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator hiss like it was whispering warnings in a language I almost understood. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. Every creak in the hallway felt like a footstep coming closer. I kept turning the threatening note over in my hands until the edges softened under my fingers. You don't know anything. No. I did know something. Whoever wrote that had been in my home while I was gone. Whoever wrote that had wanted me to feel hunted. And I did. Not because I was weak, but because fear isn't a choice. Fear is a survival instinct humming through your bones. By the time the sky began turning from black to blue, I'd made a decision. I couldn't fight this alone. Not anymore. At 7 a.m., with my hands still trembling slightly, I reached for the one card I'd been resisting. The one I knew was dangerous in a different way. Lucas Hawthorne's number. My reflection in the dark TV screen looked strange, tired, angry, hollowed out, and sharper around the edges than I'd ever seen myself before. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. He picked up on the first ring. Harper. His voice was calm, steady, smooth, like he'd been expecting me. I swallowed. Someone was in my apartment. A beat of silence, not hesitation, calculation. Are you hurt? He asked finally. No. Is anything missing? No. Then tell me what they left. I closed my eyes. A note. What did it say? You don't know anything. Another pause. I could almost hear him thinking. Where are you now? He asked. At home. How long ago did you realize someone was inside? Last night, when I got home after the meeting. He exhaled slowly. Leave the apartment. Take nothing except essentials. Do not use your credit cards. Do not get into a rideshare. Why? I whispered, a knot forming in my throat. Because when someone wants to intimidate you, he said, they leave a note. His voice lowered. When someone wants to track you, they place one. A chill crawled down my spine. I grabbed my bag with shaking hands. Where do I go? I'm sending a driver, he said. A black SUV. It will stop at the corner outside your building. Get in. Don't speak to anyone else. Don't look back. My heart thudded painfully. Lucas, you called me, he said. So now you follow my instructions. The line clicked. For a moment I stood there frozen, gripping my bag, my breath coming too shallow. The room felt wrong, violated, like a stranger was still hiding somewhere in the shadows watching me. I didn't look around. I didn't want to know. I left. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, my fingers brushing the cold metal railing as I descended. Every floor I passed reminded me that someone in this building might have seen me come home last night, might have been watching, might have followed me up the stairs. The second I reached the lobby, I walked straight out onto the street. Snow crunched under my boots, my lungs burned with cold air. I kept my gaze forward, not allowing myself to glance back at the building where I'd slept for months. A black SUV pulled up exactly at the corner. Dark windows, no license plate on the front. The rear door opened. "Get in," a voice said. I didn't ask questions. I slid inside, closing the door quickly behind me. The car began moving before I'd even buckled my seatbelt. Only then did I see the man sitting beside me, not the driver. Lucas. He was wearing a charcoal coat, tailored and expensive, with a scarf loosely draped around his neck. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those quiet, observant eyes, moved over me like he was taking inventory of every detail I wasn't saying. "You made the right call," he said softly. I exhaled shakily. I didn't know what else to do. "Yes, you did," he murmured. "You did exactly what you should." The SUV glided through the snowy streets, heading north. I finally found my voice. "Someone was in my apartment," I said quietly. "They went through my things. They left the note on my bed." "They were sending a message," he said. "Not to stop you from discovering the truth, because you already have. They want to scare you into silence." It almost worked. "It didn't," he said. "You're here." I stared out the window. Elaine warned me. She said Martin wouldn't stop. "He won't," Lucas said. "He's cornered. Men like him are most dangerous right before they fall." My hands tightened in my lap. "I don't want him to fall because of me." Lucas turned his head, his voice turning firm. "You didn't create this. You didn't set this trap. You only uncovered what was always there." "I didn't want any of this." "No," he said, "but you were built for it." I didn't know how to respond to that. I didn't know if I wanted to. I swallowed. "Where are we going?" "To a place where you can breathe." 10 minutes later, the SUV pulled into a private garage under a building twice as expensive as anything I'd ever walked into. A security guard nodded and opened the gate. The car glided into a spot near a private elevator. When the doors shut behind us, the city vanished. Lucas gestured for me to step inside the elevator with him. The interior was paneled in dark wood and gold accents, elegant without being ostentatious. "This is one of my places," he said. "You'll stay here until I'm certain you're not being watched." I blinked. "Stay here? With you?" A faint smile touched the corner of his lips. "Not with me. I don't live here, but you'll be safe." "I can't just disappear," I said. "You already have," he replied. "If someone is watching you, and I believe someone is, they'll assume you panicked and ran. And right now, that's exactly what we want them to think." The elevator glided to a stop. The doors opened into a penthouse that made my breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the city, snow falling gently over skyscrapers, the river cutting through the steel and concrete like a ribbon of silver. The space was minimalist, immaculate, silent. Nothing like the cramped, cold apartment I had left. "This is," I whispered. "A safe house," Lucas finished. "One I keep for situations that require discretion." I turned to him. "Have you done this before?" "Yes." "For people you barely know?" His eyes softened slightly. "I don't barely know you, Harper." I didn't know what that meant. He walked toward the kitchen, picked up a remote and pressed a button. The windows frosted over instantly, turning opaque white. "Privacy mode," he said. "No one can see in, not from drones, not from cameras, not from telescopes, nothing." I stared at him, the weight of the past 24 hours finally crashing into me. "What happens now?" I whispered. He walked toward me, stopping a foot away, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of cedar and winter on his coat. "Now," he said softly, "you tell me everything, every detail, every threat, every number you found, every pattern you saw, And I'll tell you who your real enemy is." My pulse quickened. "It's Martin." "No," he said quietly. "Martin is a symptom." A chill crawled down my spine. "Then who—" "Sit," he said gently. "Drink water, breathe, and start at the beginning." I sat on the edge of the sleek leather sofa, hands trembling slightly. He poured a glass of water and placed it in front of me with a firmness that steadied me more than the drink itself. So I told him. Everything. About the fake files, the missing documents, the threats, the break-in, the whispered warnings, the shell company, the transactions, the signatures, the terminal logs, the audit, the danger closing in on me like a tightening noose. He didn't interrupt once, not with a question, not with a comment. He listened like every word mattered. When I finished, my throat felt raw. My hands were cold. My chest was tight. He leaned back slowly, processing everything. Then he spoke. "Harborview," he said, "isn't just hiding liabilities." I looked at him, heart thudding. "What do you mean?" He rested his elbows on his knees, eyes meeting mine with quiet intensity. "Someone is using Pinegate Holdings to launder debt," he said. "Debt belonging to a much larger entity." "What entity?" He hesitated. Then he said a name that nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. Grant Holdings. My father's company, my father's empire, my father's legacy. I went completely still. No sound, no breath, no blinking. "Martin is protecting someone inside Grant Holdings," Lucas continued. "Someone who's been using Harborview as a shield. Someone whose downfall would have catastrophic consequences for everyone tied to that company." I whispered, barely audible, "My father." "Most likely," he said softly, "or someone he trusts." The world tilted beneath me. "It doesn't matter who," he added. "What matters is that you've uncovered something people will do anything to keep buried." I gripped the edge of the sofa. "So what am I supposed to do?" "You stay here," he said. "You stay quiet. You stay alive." "And my job?" "Consider yourself on leave." "And the audit?" "I'll handle what you can't." I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. "So I just hide?" I whispered. He shook his head. "No," he said. "You prepare." "For what?" "For the moment when the truth becomes too big to contain." My chest tightened. "When will that be?" Lucas held my gaze, his voice low and certain. "Soon." Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the truth had finally come home, and nothing in my life would be the same again. I stood at the edge of the ballroom as the last fragments of applause from Lucas's speech dissolved into a heavy, stunned silence. The chandeliers glittered above me as if nothing had happened, as if the entire room hadn't just watched the fabric of my family's carefully curated narrative rip clean in one violent tear. Yet I felt every eye still clinging to me, trying to understand how the homeless embarrassment had transformed into the billionaire who saved a corporation none of them could afford to lose. But I no longer cared what they were thinking. For the first time in my life, the weight of their judgment didn't sit on my shoulders. It sat on theirs. Charlotte stood frozen near the edge of the crowd, her crimson dress shimmering under the lights, her face pale and hollow as she stared at me like she was finally seeing a ghost she'd spent years pretending didn't exist. My father stood beside her, but his posture had collapsed. He wasn't the towering, untouchable patriarch of Grant Holdings now. He looked small, reduced, lost. But I didn't walk toward them. I walked toward the exit. The hushed whispers parted around me like a wave. I heard fragments: billionaire, Grant Holdings, majority shareholder, exposed, concealed debt, snaking through the air like static. For years, I had walked through rooms like this invisible. Tonight, I walked through it untouchable. I reached the hallway. The noise dulled behind the closing doors, leaving only the echo of my heels on marble and the sharp pounding of my own pulse. I didn't stop moving. I didn't let myself look back. I had said everything I needed to say to this family long before tonight. They just hadn't been ready to listen. Now they had no choice. As I neared the doors leading to the coat room, I heard footsteps, urgent, shaky, chasing behind me. "Harper!" I kept walking. "Harper, please, stop!" It was Charlotte. Her voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since we were children. I stopped. Slowly, I turned. She looked nothing like the composed, self-righteous socialite who had hissed, "Leave. You're embarrassing the family," into my ear an hour before. That woman had vanished. This one, this trembling version, looked like someone watching her world splinter between her hands. Her eyes searched mine. "Harper, what just happened in there?" "You tell me," I said quietly. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I didn't know you were successful," I finished. "Alive? Worth something?" She winced. "That isn't what I meant." "No?" I asked. "Then what exactly do you mean, Charlotte? Because for 12 years, not a single person in this family cared to ask me anything." She clasped her hands tightly. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." Her breath hitched. "I came to your apartment once," she whispered. "Years ago. You weren't home." "And that's what you call trying?" I asked softly. Her gaze dropped. "You were always so far ahead of me," she murmured. "You were everything I couldn't be. Smart, independent, brave. You left and built a life without needing any of us. And I stayed. I stayed because I was scared I wouldn't survive without them." I paused, because that, finally, was the first true thing she'd said all night. Fear has a way of turning people into monsters when they think their survival depends on it. Charlotte needed to be the perfect daughter to remain safe in our father's world. And I needed to become nothing to escape it. "We both survived," I said gently, "just in different ways. I don't want to survive this way anymore." Her eyes lifted slowly to mine. "Harper, I am so sorry." I let the silence stretch long between us. "You don't owe me forgiveness," I said, "and I don't owe it to you." She nodded, swallowing hard. "But," I continued, "I'm willing to start from zero, with no past, no excuses." Her eyes softened with a hope I hadn't expected to see. "I would like that," she whispered. I gave her a small nod before stepping toward the exit again. This time, she didn't follow. I passed the coat room and reached the front doors of the Grant estate. Cold winter air swept around me as I stepped into the night. Snowflakes drifted from the dark sky, catching the lights from the archway above, turning the night into something hushed and holy. For a second, I let myself breathe. Really breathe. Then, "Harper." My father's voice. I turned slowly. He stood just outside the doorway, framed by golden light and falling snow. But power no longer clung to him. He didn't look angry or proud or dominant. He looked like a man walking through the ruin of a kingdom he had built with his own hands. He walked toward me slowly, as if he wasn't sure I'd stay long enough for him to reach me. I didn't move. When he stood a few feet away, he stopped. His breath clouded in the cold air. "I don't know where to start," he said quietly. "Try honesty," I replied. He closed his eyes. "I failed you." The confession hung in the air between us, fragile and trembling like the snowflakes landing on his coat. "I failed you as a father," he continued. "I failed you the moment I decided you didn't fit the life I wanted. The moment I told you to leave." My jaw tightened. He swallowed. "Tonight, when Lucas said your name, when he said what you had become, I realized I didn't know you. I haven't known you in years. Because I chose not to." I didn't say anything. He looked at the ground, then back at me. His voice cracked. "I'm ashamed, deeply ashamed." The wind curled around us, tugging at my hair, biting my cheeks. "You didn't want to see me," I said softly. "You wanted a version of me that didn't exist. Not then, not now." "I know." His eyes glistened, not with manipulation but age, exhaustion, regret settling into the lines of his face like it had been waiting a long time to arrive. "I cannot undo what I did," he whispered. "I cannot rewrite 12 years of silence. But if there is any space left, any small corner of your heart that still has room for me—" His voice broke. "I would like to try. To be better. To know the woman you've become. Not the one I invented." I looked at him for a long moment. My father had always spoken in commands, threats, expectations. But this was something else entirely. Something I had wanted to hear once. When I was 19. When I needed him. Not now. "You don't need to earn my forgiveness," I said quietly. "Because I don't need your apology." He exhaled, devastated. "But I do want something," I added gently. "And it's simple." His eyes lifted. "Anything. Respect," I said. "Not for what I've achieved, but for who I am." He nodded slowly, painfully. "You have it," he whispered. "You always should have." A long silence stretched between us. Then I spoke the sentence I had carried like a stone for 1/3 of my life. "You wanted me gone," I said. "And I went. You didn't expect me to survive. But I did. You didn't expect me to succeed. But I did. And now, for the first time, I'm not fighting you, and I'm not fighting for you." He flinched. "I'm simply living," I finished. "And you can choose to be part of that or not. But the choice belongs to you, not me." A tear slid down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. "Harper," he whispered, "I want to try." "I believe that," I said softly. "But tonight isn't the night to start." He nodded, stunned but accepting. I stepped past him, feeling his gaze follow me like a silent prayer. As I reached the end of the walkway, a black town car pulled up, the one Lucas sent for me. The door opened. Lucas stood there. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe, or relief, or something I wasn't ready to name. I walked toward him slowly. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything," I exhaled. "You did everything," he said. "You walked into a room built to erase you, and you walked out owning every inch of it." I let out a shaky breath. "I thought I'd feel vindicated." "And you don't?" "No," I whispered. "I feel done." He nodded. "Closure is quieter than victory." A beat passed. Then he opened the car door wider. "Come on," he murmured gently. "You've had enough of tonight." I stepped inside. He followed. As the driver pulled away from the Grant estate, I watched the mansion shrink through the fogged window, its glowing windows dimming into the snowy darkness. For the first time in 12 years, I felt weightless, untethered, free. I turned away from the window and let my eyes close, and for the first time in a very long time, sleep came without a fight. The morning light over Manhattan broke in soft gold, warming the corners of my bedroom as if the city itself had decided I'd earned a gentler beginning. I woke slowly, not startled or defensive the way I'd grown used to living, but with a strange, unfamiliar stillness inside my chest. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, listening to the muted hum of traffic, the whisper of wind against the windows, the quiet pulse of a life finally unburdened. It felt like the first true breath I'd taken in 12 years. I slid out of bed and crossed the room barefoot, stepping into the patch of sunlight stretching across the hardwood floor. My body still ached with the emotional weight of the gala, the revelations, the confrontation, the unraveling of a story that had held me captive for too long. But beneath all of it was something I hadn't expected to feel. Peace. A quiet, steady kind of peace. I walked into the kitchen and brewed a cup of coffee, leaning against the counter as the aroma filled the air. My phone buzzed with notifications. Emails, missed calls, press requests, articles already circulating about the mysterious billionaire who stunned Boston high society. I placed the phone face down. Today wasn't for them. Halfway through my coffee, the buzzer rang. I hesitated before answering. "Yes?" "It's me," Charlotte's voice said, soft and unsure. I blinked in surprise. Come up. Moments later, she stepped inside, her eyes puffy and her coat still dusted with snow. She looked around slowly, taking in the high ceilings, the sunlight, the quiet elegance of the space. It was nothing like the life she imagined I had. You look calmer, she said. For the first time, I replied. She nodded, swallowing. I wanted to see you, to say that I didn't sleep much last night. I didn't expect you to. I kept replaying everything I said, everything I did. She looked at me, eyes glistening. I hurt you, Harper. Over and over, I hurt you. I took a slow sip of coffee. We all hurt in that house, I said. Just in different ways. She walked closer, her fingers twisting nervously. Do you think we can start over? Not sisters the way we were supposed to be, but sisters in some new way, different, honest. I exhaled, hearing the tremor in her voice. We can try. She let out a breath that sounded like relief and grief intertwined. Thank you, she whispered. We sat at the kitchen island. For the first time in years, we spoke without the shadow of our father's expectations hanging between us. She told me about her job, her fears, the pressure of being the perfect granddaughter, how she felt trapped in a role she never asked for, and I listened. When she left, she hugged me tightly. Not as an apology, not as a plea, just as a sister. After she was gone, I dressed and took the elevator down to the lobby. The doorman greeted me warmly, and I stepped into the crisp winter air. Snowflakes drifted gently around me, catching the light like tiny diamonds. I walked to the riverside promenade and stopped by the railing, watching the current swirl past, my breath forming soft clouds in the cold. So much of my life had been shaped by running, from expectations, from judgment, from a home that had never been home. But I wasn't running anymore. I was simply living. I stayed there until my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a name I did expect. Lucas. I answered. Morning. Harper, he said, and the warmth in his voice was unguarded, quiet. How are you? I'm lighter, I admitted. I'm glad. He paused. Do you have time today? For? A conversation, he said, about next steps, for the audit, the company, and for you. I smiled faintly. Always. Good. I'll come by your place in an hour. I hung up, pocketed my phone, and turned toward home. When he arrived, he brought warmth with him, a presence that steadied the air just by entering the room. He set his coat on the back of a chair and took a moment to look at me in that observant way of his, like he was cataloging the subtle changes in my posture, my expression, my breathing. You look different, he said. I feel different. I can tell. He sat across from me, hands loosely clasped. The audit has been escalated. Investigators are moving fast. Grant Holdings won't be able to hide the debt long. Whatever your father has been protecting, it's over. I nodded. I expected as much. You should prepare yourself, he continued, for your name to be tied to it. Not because you're involved, because you're the one who exposed it. That makes you powerful. And it makes you a threat. I've been a threat for a long time, I said quietly. I just never had the title to prove it. His mouth curved into a faint smile. You do now, billionaire. I rolled my eyes, but warmth spread across my chest. Don't call me that. Why not? It's true. It feels disconnected, like it belongs to someone else. No, he said gently. It belongs exactly to you. You earned every inch of it, every scar. I looked down at my hands. The gala felt like the end of something. It was, he said. But it was also the beginning. Of what? Of whatever you choose next. A breath left me, slow and steady. What do you think I should choose? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Yourself. Silence settled between us, soft, charged, honest. Then he cleared his throat slightly. There's one more thing. What? You should probably see this. He slid a folded letter across the table. My heart tightened. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. My father. I unfolded the paper. His words were shaky but deliberate. Harper, I have no right to ask anything of you. But I want you to know that I am proud of the woman you became. Without me. If you ever decide there is space for me in your life, I will take that chance gratefully and humbly. If not, I will spend the rest of my life understanding why. Dad. I folded the letter slowly. I don't know what to do with this, I whispered. You don't have to decide today, Lucas said. He wants a chance. Do you? I looked out the window at the city that raised me in ways my family never did. I want peace, I said, then follow what brings it. I placed the letter on the table and nodded. Someday, maybe. That's enough. He stood, and I walked him to the door. Before he stepped out, he paused. If you ever need anything, he said softly, you call me first. I know. Good. He turned to leave and then, Lucas? He looked back. Thank you, I said quietly, for everything. His expression softened, not the controlled version he gave the world, but something real. Always, Harper. After he left, the apartment felt warm, not empty. I sat on the sofa, watching the lights of the city bloom to life one by one. A slow realization spread through me. Gentle, steady, profound. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I didn't need to fix what broke me. I only needed to keep choosing the life I built. My life. As night settled, I stood at the window overlooking the city that had tested me, punished me, and ultimately remade me. Snow drifted softly past the glass. Below, people hurried through the cold, carrying their own stories, their own battles, their own beginnings. For the first time, my heart felt quiet, whole, and mine. If you've been here with me, through every twist, every wound, every secret, thank you. Stories like this carry weight, and sharing them creates connection. If you want more stories of justice, redemption, and unexpected strength, make sure to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Your support keeps these stories alive.